So are podcasters and YouTubers becoming an extension of mainstream media? A few weeks ago, I released a video on Joe Rogan and my criticisms of Joe Rogan. I heard all of you loud and clear. Some of you were very critical, but I want to clarify my point because I think it's very important. If you look at the major YouTubers that get big names on their podcasts and on their videos, when they have a chance to interview them, rarely will you actually see them ask hard-hitting questions. Now, I take the point of criticism to say that these are not investigative journalists, and they're not meant to be investigative journalists towards these big names. But I think regardless, there is a responsibility, especially if it's on the content that your channel is about, to ask some deeper questions as well. A perfect example is not just Joe Rogan with Elon Musk, because if you were to listen to literally every Elon Musk podcast, it's all flattery. I mean, it's very rare. I don't think Joe Rogan ever once criticizes Elon Musk at all. It's very much like two guys kind of like just shooting the breeze, and I get that. And it's really fun and it's exciting to listen to, and sometimes you just want that as a relief. And it's unfair of me sometimes to put this investigative journalist standard on Joe Rogan. But in other episodes that I find are really engaging by Joe, that I think are so impactful, are ones like where he interviews Vijay Gad and Jack Dorsey on Twitter and lets Tim Pool ask really tough questions to Jack Dorsey and Vijay Gad about Twitter at the time. I thought that was really interesting and such a unique take, and something that Joe recognized was not being done in mainstream media, that tough questions for a lot of these social media executives were not being asked. And the Joe Rogan Experience was this place to do that. And the same is true for others that he's had on, Mike Baker, Graham Hancock, the list goes on, where he really does delve into some of the nuance. And I find that really thoughtful and exciting and engaging. But when it comes to Elon Musk, where there's so many topics to talk about, unionizing staff, the Shanghai plant, the fact that Tesla benefited from billions of dollars from Obama during the Obama years in Grant. And then they built out this massive charging infrastructure, and only Tesla cars work at those charging infrastructures. Those are questions I would ask Elon Musk, and that's just based on what I've been able to ascertain. But Joe doesn't do that. And it's not just Joe Rogan. MKBHD has interviewed Elon Musk. MKBHD has interviewed Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. And if you ever notice in those interviews, they're very flattering. It's very rare that they're critical. Now, MKBHD is the top tech YouTuber, and you would think that when he has these big executives on, there's an element of some of the criticisms that he's lodged against, let's say, Android, Apple, and some of the simplicity in Apple's designs, or the fragility in some of Apple's products, the $700 rollers for its Mac Pro, or, insane charging location for its app. But then when he gets these people on his podcast or on his YouTube channel, it switches. The whole script flips. And I think I know why. It's because no big guest is ever going to turn down an interview where it's all flattery, right? No big guest is going to say no to an interview where all they talk about is all the good that the person's doing or that the company is doing. They would love that. That's free promotion. People check out their website, they buy their products, they line up for the Cybertruck, they line up for the next MacBook, whatever it is. This is an extension of mainstream media, because what we saw and what we see in mainstream media is overproduced, very superficial conversations, period. Let's just call it what it is. Overproduced, superficial conversations. It's very rare that you see some mainstream media journalists delve into the criticisms that can actually unpack and uncover much more than what they've kind of plotted out to do. And I can understand why. You've got a network and ratings, etc. I think that a lot of these big podcasters and YouTubers are falling into that trap because they know that more eyeballs will be on their product if that name is on their YouTube channel or on their YouTube video or on their podcast. And we're all in it for views and clicks. So it's almost like mainstream media is looking at these big podcasters and YouTubers and saying, you're just playing a different game. You're playing the same game, just on a different platform. And the final example, or one of the final examples I'll have about this, is the Cybertruck from Tesla was recently released. This thing has an exterior of stainless steel. It's bulletproof. If you crash into it, your car's done. The Cybertruck remains. It's got this exoskeleton. Not once did any of these big YouTubers ever talk about the impact this will have for pedestrians and cyclists. God forbid a cyclist gets doored by this thing, someone opening their door. That cyclist can really be significantly injured, potentially permanently injured by this monstrosity on the road. Now, you could say to me, well, how is this different from the Hummer? And it's true. There's not much of a difference, really. If a Hummer doors a cyclist, it's also pretty bad. But the fact that it has this exoskeleton of stainless steel, which is an incredible feat of technology, but also poses this risk to our environment in which it interacts with. The fact that not any of the major YouTubers pointed this out initially. I mean, Jerry Rig Everything did a great job about that, but generally speaking, people were very flattering about it. There is something more that's going on, and nobody wants to talk about some of the negative aspects of Tesla. And if they do, it's very minuscule. And so to me, this kind of like lets me know that this is an extension. This is going down the pathway of mainstream media. Very superficial, very overproduced videos. Remember, my whole thing is maybe mainstream media is looking at these guys and saying, hey, you're just playing the same game on a different platform. Honestly, that's my assessment. My final example of this was, Bill Maher. I love watching Bill Maher sometimes. He's got some really interesting takes and he's hilarious. He's really funny. And so, or sometimes he's funny. But, there's a lot of things I agree with Bill Maher on. There's a lot of things I disagree with Bill Maher on. He had the opportunity about 7 or 8 years ago to interview Barack Obama. And I would argue, and I'll leave links below for you to watch, it's about 30 minutes. I would argue that interview, very softball questions, very flattering to Obama. He asked some tough questions about legalization and things like that, but generally speaking, very flattering to Obama. I'm not criticizing necessarily the structure of the interview because I can totally imagine that Obama's people told Bill Maher's people that this is what's on the ask list. This is what's not on the ask list. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And I totally get that. It's part of the game. But I think there's this authenticity in online media, social media, YouTube, etc., where we expect from YouTubers, unfairly perhaps, a more independent take, a more like, this is what regular people are thinking, and you as this YouTuber have this responsibility to mimic or echo what regular people are thinking, because we're not getting that from mainstream media. We're not getting that from the CNNs and the Fox News and the NBCs, etc. So we come to the YouTube platforms and to social media for the alternative, where we can get into some of these more detailed conversations. And don't get me wrong, it does happen, but it doesn't happen with the biggest names. That's my honest opinion, and it makes me wonder what the bigger play is here. And I think, again, like I say, and I say this again, and I'll take the heat for it, but mainstream media is looking at these YouTubers and saying, you're playing the same game, just on a different platform. And the question I would ask all of us here who is invested in open minds and open and broad discourse, there is that theory, thank you to someone, and thank you to one of the commenters, that theory of Overton Window, which is politicians are always looking for what's most popular to build their platform around. They're looking also for ideas that are unacceptable and outright just completely, out there. And they're totally excluding those. But they're including the ones that are popular, and that changes over time. So they can only talk about what's in the popular window, Overton's window, in terms of what's acceptable and what's popular. What's unacceptable, unthinkable, unimaginable, they're not even going to mention because it's unthinkable and unimaginable. I think these top YouTubers, Joe Rogan, MKBHD, PBD podcasts, all the big names are falling into Overton's window if they're not already there. Which is, they're looking for the hot topics, as they should. They're only sticking to those hot topics. They're going to only ask questions around those hot topics and also what's acceptable. And they're definitely not going to ask questions on the unthinkable and the unacceptable. It's not in their interest to do that. It's not going to lead to more clicks and likes and views and follows and shares. It's only going to lead to more of, the opportunity to get canceled and not have that person back on their show. So, that's my honest criticism of where the state of YouTubers and podcasters are going when it comes to having these big names on. You might be asking, who the heck am I to throw stones? You're right. But I do think there's a level of accountability that we have to apply to YouTubers and podcasters that we would apply to mainstream media, which is I came here for more detailed conversations, and I'm just not getting that. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Am I being too critical? Am I expecting too much? Let me know what you think. I'd love to know your thoughts.